Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal production channel here at YouTube. Welcome to another album review. And this, of course, was postponed. This album was supposed, or at least this review, was supposed to have come out on the week when I did my Album of the Week video for the Rod's album, well, in the Raw. Well, on that same week, my copy of the record never came. And when going on Amazon, even though it was pre-ordered, however, on that on the listing, they had it what was it, the shipping day or something? It was gonna come as late to like 2 to 3 months. So I just went ahead on that day, or at least a few weeks or so, just to kind of give it time to see if whether or not it was a little hiccup or whatever. Turns out it just wasn't getting shipped or anyway, and of course, again, 2 to 3 months. They pretty much were going to live up to the 2 to 3 months anyway, so I pretty much, at that time, I kind of pretty much canceled it, just to wait out and see whenever Amazon was actually going to get a copy in. And if you can, I'm not going to get into the techniques on the whole deal with the 2 to 3 months crap over at Amazon, which I think is stupid. If you don't have the album in, or at least your product in, don't say you're going to ship out within 2 to 3 months. Say it isn't available. Just get it from these other sellers, which I could have done, but Amazon was probably the only one that was actually getting this, at least the vinyl copy from Steamhammer, at least at the price of 23 bucks. Which is they were the only place I was selling for that cheap, so I just waited and waited. So wait until at least a month later. And sure enough, they got copies in and went back to ordering it. So it arrived pretty much on the day that I'm recording this review. So without further ado, let's finally get into it. I could have done any other album review, but since I had already ordered this one for the second time, finally I'm about to review this album. So let's just get right into it. So, The Rod's Brotherhood of Metal, which is this album right here, is right now you can pretty much say their 7th studio album. You can also count it as being their 8th for, well, they had, I guess if you count the Hollywood album, when they was originally released as Kennedy, Feinstein, Bordenero, and Caudle. But it got re-released by, Cult Metal Classics, and released it under the Rod's banner. And you can also maybe count this as maybe the 9th album from them, counting the live record that was released in 1983. I guess the same very year as in the Raw. And you may also count this as the 10th if you still consider the self-titled album as a second album. So, with that, this is still their 7th album. Pretty much, 8 years since their reunion album from 2011, titled Vengeance. Which was a solid album. But given this album a first listen, which is probably the first time in, at least within months or so, that I've done a review that's just based around a first impression on listening. And already from first listen, this album kicks ass. This is pretty much straight up 100% American steel. Just completely a molten metal, meaty riffs, and just kick-ass party heavy freaking steel heavy metal. I know that was a little bit of a mouthful, but still, again, solid album. Just again, kicking off with, of course, with the title track, which of course starting off with sort of a very, I guess you could say, kind of more epic, mellow kind of track, and just a way of building up into the sort of almost, I guess, slight almost speed power metal of this track. Almost kind of reminded me a bit of Riot, especially during the Thunder Steel to, of course, Riot V days. Of course, still Riot V days. Of course, the track, of course, clocks in at pretty much 7 minutes and 28 seconds. So, again, it's a very epic track, and it's probably the only epic track on here. Everything else, it's pretty much on to, well, what the Rods are pretty much best known for. That's just cranking out, well, again, just classic, no BS, heavy rock and roll. And again, beginning with Everybody's Rockin', which, well, pretty much lives to it. To then, of course, Smoke on the Horizon. Of course, the side B with Louder Than Loud, Tyrant King, Party All Night, which is kind of a groovier kind of track. And of course, side C with Tonight We Ride, beginning with sort of those pretty much like motorcycles and everything, which is pretty much just a great biker song. That's pretty much what the Rods, of course, sound anyways. It's pretty much built around sort of biker metal. Of course, 1982, which is pretty much a nod and a tribute to, of course, that classic time period, to when the Rods released their second album, their true second album, Wild Dogs, and of course, pretty much making all references to the bands that they opened up for, from Judas Priest to Motorhead, played with Metallica, Def Leppard, and those bands, Rainbow. Pretty much all owed to that, and it's a great sort of song. And of course, Hell on Earth probably definitely being one of the more heavier songs. Of course, side D, sung up with, again, typical sort of rocker from the Rods, being The Devil Made Me Do It. So, of course, probably, I guess, kind of slightly more epic track here, but it's not in the way that you get with the beginning title track. But still, even to me, it's a good song nonetheless. Of course, that pretty much, in a way, rounds out the whole actual album. Because if you got the CD copy, it would just be the regular. But if you got the vinyl copy here, you get an extra track that's not on the CD, and that's called Crank It Up, 35 Years. Now, if you are let's say, really familiar with the Rods, that means everything about this band, especially given the fact that David Feinstein, of course, is the cousin of the late Ronnie James Dio, and also being an original member of Elf, which of course was Ronnie James Dio's sort of classic boogie blues rock and roll band before joining Rainbow, or joining forces with Ritchie Blackmore to start Rainbow. Well, if you are, besides that, there is another real tidbit here. Crank It Up was actually, especially if you got the High Voltage CD reissue of In the Raw, there was like a bit of a radio spot, and of course there are two, but the one is the very last radio spot, which I can go back to my... Wait, stop. As upon recording this, I pretty much realize that this is, what I'm about to say here is nothing but false information. The song Crank It Up 35 Years, which of course is, again, a bonus track to the vinyl copy of this album, is not the first time that it's being recorded for an album. No, it's a re-recording. It's originally can be found on both Rock Hard and the self-titled album, which are pretty much just the same record, but repackaged. The song Crank It Up was, of course, track number 2 on the self-titled album when it was re-released as the self-titled album, and of course track number 8 on the album known as Rock Hard, which of course is, well, the first pressing of the album before it got repackaged as the self-titled album. So with that, I'm just going to skip right onto it. So with that, it's time to resume the video. So with that, a very great way to end off, I guess, in a real way to end off the actual album, because of as much as it's cool to have the CD copy, which of course comes with pretty much every copy of the Steam Hammer Records vinyl. So there's the CD right there, and just this little sleeve, which I'll soon be replacing with an actual sort of jewel case, or mini jewel cases, so to keep it properly stored. And I ain't gonna store within the record because I have paranoia fears of cracking shit. So with that, I think this review has gone on. I mean, this is a great, solid album. Everything. If you're familiar with the Rods, then you know what you're gonna get with this album. This is, again, just really just solid slab of New York American heavy metal steel. And that's the best way I can pretty much summon up this whole entire album. It's just great. However, I am forgetting that there is a little interesting part about this one. There's actually a keyboard player on here. Let me kind of bring up, get this out for a bit. Actually look up Alright, the keyboard player here is, of course, called Lonnie Park, who, of course, did some collaboration with David Feinstein as far as the information goes about his contributions. But this is the first time actually working anything with the rods, and his keyboard style is very organ-like, giving almost the album at times a slight deep purple Uriah Heep feel, which is really interesting because the rod sound has always been sort of a combination between either Motorhead, Ted Nugent, or AC/DC. It just has that kind of just straight up great, sort of, again, great metal or boogie kind of hard rockin' feel that you always got with a lot of the new wave or British heavy metal bands. And that's why I almost kind of consider the Rods always to be more of an American new wave or British heavy metal band. And they always kept it very straightforward in a way, I guess, until you got the Heavier Than Thou album, which kind of was a little more unique. But this album, and again, pulls a lot of, decides to pull something else again, adding keyboard player Lonnie Park, which has a very sort of organ, Hammond organ feel to it, which again gives the album more of a deep purple Uriah Heep feel to it, kind of mixed in with this sort of metal feel. Almost kind of reminded me of the last Uriah Heep album, Living the Dreamin' Away, which is a lot more even heavier, more metallic, and a more of a Judas Priest kind of way. So that's pretty much I've gone along about the sort of album, and of course trying to sum up every bit of this album. So it's gonna be time to finally get to the score. So what's my score? Well, it's an 8.80 out of 10. I mean, it's surprisingly this freaking good, and if anything, this is again, like, I think what I kind of kicked off with this video is saying this is probably slightly better than Vengeance. And I will definitely say, I've given that album at least some sort of listens here and there, but from what I heard, this album is actually way better than Vengeance. Vengeance was not a bad album at all, but they definitely came up with an album that I think was a lot more stronger, and in many ways, probably definitely lives up to some of the classic that this band has released, definitely with like Wild Dogs, or In the Raw, or Let 'Em Eat Metal, or even, again, Heavier Than Thou. I would say probably this is probably some of the best material since probably Heavier Than Thou. Heavier Than Thou. Still, great album. There's nothing bad with here. If you are definitely a fan of this band and like what they do, you're not going to be disappointed. This album has been released since June 7th, though Amazon were dickheads and didn't seem to have gotten a copy and had to make people wait for 2 to 3 months. So yeah, there's one for you, Amazon. So, with that, great album, killer stuff, great effort from the Rods. This video has gone on, so I hope you all enjoyed. If you have heard this sound, definitely leave your comments down below. If you haven't, I definitely recommend it. So until then, this is Heavy Thrasher Sam out. I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.